Daniel King, Clifford Jefferson, Senator Godfrey, the fifth caravan Jew, Father Henry, the one who helped preserve our illustrious agnatic estate, which was broken through the relations that they had with their concubines, i.e. those who were descended from different ethnicities associated with the Roman Catholic Church. We come to fix that problem as a result of what we call Part 2 Secretary Trim, which is the status of our women, which is a result of the breaking of the bloodline, which comes from Province Patriarch. Province Patriarch was a bloodline descent system that was carried through the patrilineal down to the matrilineal, so that the heirs and successors could originate from the origin where it was established in lieu of what we call birthright. That has been stolen. And that's been stolen by those who assume to be heirs and successors of this birthright, as established being just by being born on just soil versus or contrast to just Sanguinis, which is the reason why we're in this condition today. So without further ado, we'll continue on with part 3. We're going to save all remarks because of the longevity of this lesson and get right into the nitty-gritty. All right, part 2, Secretary Beard Flint. Sister Walker, you can read.
Yes.
Oh, are you able to read, Sister Walker?
Yes, I'm here. Part 2, Secretary Ventrim, that which is born follows the womb, also partus, which was a legal doctrine passed in colonial Virginia in 1662 and other English crown colonies in the Americas, which defined the legal status of children born there. The doctrine mandated that all children would inherit the legal status of their mothers. As such, children of enslaved women would be born into slavery. The legal doctrine of Partus Sequitur Ventrum was derived from Roman civil law, specifically the portions concerning slavery and personal property, chattels.
Oh, that's good. Got right there. So as you can see, Americas, under the crown colonies, which were the ones who were allowed under the monarch sitting on the crown, which were not English monarchs, because the English monarchs were overthrown by way of usurpation, by what we call right of conquest and right of discovery. All right. And as a result of that, the English heirs and successors were forced under civil and admiralty law, practiced under what we call the Roman law, Partus Sequitur Ventrum, as the status of their mother, based off an inherited birthright. Inheritance deals with hereditaments. So if you inherit a hereditament from your mother as a slave, that means that under Antonine, just like King James them, you would be considered slaves as well. And it was implemented by those who assumed to have the birthright by operation of law, because at the time of the law, it was being circumvented by those who were sitting in the position to make and pass laws that were arbitrary, capricious, and outside of the English common law. All right, continue on.
The doctrine's most significant effect was placing into chattel slavery all children born to enslaved women. Partus Sequitur Ventrum soon spread from the colony of Virginia to all the 13 colonies. As a function of the political economy of chattel slavery in colonial America, the legalism of Partus Sequitur Ventrum exempted the biological father from relationship toward children he fathered with enslaved women, and gave all rights in the children to the slave owner. The denial of paternity to enslaved children secured the slaveholder's right to profit from exploiting the labor of children engendered, bred, and born into slavery. The doctrine also meant that multiracial children with white mothers were born free. Every generation of free Negroes in the American South were formed from unions between free working class, usually mixed race women, and Black men. Similar legal doctrines also derived from the civil law operated in all the various European colonies in the Americas and Africa, which was established by the Spanish, Portuguese, French, or Dutch.
Okay, do you hear the history that they're talking about? They said not only by the states we're subject to now, by the colonies in the Americas, Africa, by the Spanish, Portuguese, French, and the Dutch. But if you look at the history between these countries, these ethnicities were all at war with the Anglo-Saxons. Every single one of them. War with the Anglo-Saxons, not no Negroes, not no blacks, not no colors, not no Ethiopians. Anglo-Saxon, English, Berbers. That's who they were at war with. All right. So as we can see here, that the status of Pt.3 Secretary followed the so-called people identified as Sitio Negroes. This goes back to the South Sea Bubble Company, which all the monarchs under King George III, King George II, King George I, William and Mary Orange, Queen Anne, King Charles I, King George II, King James II, and King James I of England and the Six of Scotland. All these were slave traders based off the head right system, which we discussed previously in other lectures. So as we see it, y'all, Pt.3 Secretary Pt.3 was the status that we were subject to because the father of our nation was no more, i.e. the king. Because king province patriarch means father of the nation. When a person from a state violated under the Constitution or the original Constitution at that time had colonies, it was the obligation of the Attorney General to bring a claim on behalf of an injured citizenship. But we don't see the Attorney General representing the citizenship because the only thing he could represent is corporation. And as we define in colon 1-1-2 of New Jersey Revised Statute, the same status as persons have the same status as corporations. So therefore, his only you ain't making him no money. You costing him money. So he's gonna go to the one who pays the most.
Here, here.
The corporation, they got bank.
They're selling your birthright. Here, here.
Selling your birthright.
Yep, you don't want it.
You don't want it. And we're going to show you how you don't want it. Why? Because you don't know the difference between just soil and just sanguinis. According to just soil, your birthright as a identified nickel black color Ethiopian is under the status of Pt.3 Secretary Pt.3. Why? Because you didn't get no rights under the Constitution, which legislation was derived from, pertaining to protection under the Constitution, which limits what the so-called franchise holder could do.
Here,
So under the
here.
Constitution, it didn't limit what they can do because you had no protection under that Constitution.
Speak to him, King.
All right. So if that's the case, then you must eliminate that Constitution because he who writes your books sets your timeline. Time never was what man was not. The life of time when you begin, the time when you will be no more. Well, we've always been here, right? Why? Because we got these names. We got these names. You got an English name, but you going by the name of black.
Speak to him, King.
He must be a lunatic. He must be crazy.
Speak to him, King.
And we're going to show you why we're crazy. Why? Because as I said, you don't know the difference between just soil and just sanguinis. But let's define it for you. I'm bad, y'all. I'm bad.
And as everyone is seeing, the world is resetting. So as the world is resetting from this ignorance, you have to become to the mind of intelligence. Because once you walk in amongst us, we're not going to allow you to speak that ignorance any longer. You know, we're going to hold you accountable.
Oh, point of interest. Even Marcus Garvey said, intelligence rules the world and ignorance carries the burden.
And we're going to show you how that ignorance was carried by black people.
There you go. And still carry.
We're going to show you that they put a black person in there to steal your birthright because he was ignorant of who he was. Frederick Douglass. Now, y'all know who he was, right? Y'all know who Frederick Douglass was, right? This man was an African-American at the time of abolitionist who was trying to get the status and the protection under the Constitution. But this man got a position in the franchise where his other, what they call entourage couldn't get. Y'all about to see some exposing today. How we know that? Just saw. Read that, Sister Walker.
Just Soli. meaning the right of soil, commonly referred to as birthright citizenship, is the right of anyone born in the territory of a state to nationality or citizenship. Jus soli was part of the English common law, in contrast to jus sanguinis, which derived from the Roman law that influenced the civil law system of mainland Europe.
Stop right there. Stop right there. We ain't got to read all that. We scientists here. We know Montes is a bunch of bull crap. We know Rome never existed. So don't come telling me that Rome committed birthright citizenship, because Rome can't even prove it to exist at all. There is no calendar. So when you come talking to us, you better talk about the record according to time that the court's gonna recognize. Because that's what we determine according to rights of protection. And that don't go into no constitution. When you deal with the Constitution, you better be talking about Calvin's case. Because Calvin's case was the only case that dealt with birthright citizenship from a just soil perspective. And if you go back to the case to support that, then English people ain't got no win. Because that was dealing with somebody who assumed to have the rights as an English heir and successor, and the English Parliament didn't even pass it for them. But they still went along with it anyhow. Why? Because we didn't know no better. How we know that? Dred Scott. Parliament of England said Dred Scott could not be an heir to English rights and the benefits of English rights, as well as his post-Sinai heirs and ante-Sinai heirs. But apparently they are doing it. Why? Because Dred Scott didn't know who he was. But guess what? Guess what? We're resolving that problem today because Corey Scott does. Brother Corey Scott does know who he is, and he knows he's not a Scottish king. He's descended from English heirs to successors. The only way Scottish got in there by way of marriage. We can get into that, but for the sake of time, we're not going to do that because I can go all day on this. Birthright citizenship.
But Brother Scott got a dissertation come up. He gonna funk y'all in the future. Just wait, he coming.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So as we can see, Dred Scott citizenship in regards to his ethnicity as an Englishman is not based off just soil. Because just because you're born here don't make you a citizen. Because this territory was now founded on Scottish law.
Exactly.
Smithfield, Alabama said that. The origin of common law, Smith, Alabama says the only law that America has is that of the common law of England. So King James, whatever you got to say, miss me with that. Because it's already proven that you only got the right of just being born on the soil. And who was ruling at that time of the soil? It was only based off discovery and conquest.
Exactly.
It's the way you got your rulership. But guess what? That's subject to be exceeded when the true owner comes home. Guess who's that? It's us. We're going to validate that today. Concrete, not abstract, y'all. Concrete. Because we're the grantees of the grant of the estate left intel that was stolen from you from common recovery as a result of fee and simple. And that's based off just soil. Fee and simple. We're about to prove it. Let's go here. Now we're going to show you that just law and just soil and just sanguinis all derived from the common law of England. So, as we said, happens two ways, either by operation of law or by being naturalized or by both of your parents being born, one of your parents being born in that soil. That's the only way you become a citizen, is one of your parents being born on that soil. Now, here you see in the categories, all of North America is lit up. Your soil without restrictions. I wonder why.
Hey,
I wonder why.
Hey, come on, King. Look.
Now look at England with restrictions now.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden England's got restrictions to just soil, birthright citizenship. But yet when you establish birthright citizenship in North America, now all of a sudden now it's no restrictions now. Because everybody over here ain't English. You got a whole bunch of ethnicities over here in what they call America, and their citizenship staff is based off the Dred Scott case. You come from wherever you want to, but as long as it doesn't denote to ethnicity.
Exactly.
Ethnicity denotes to just sanguineous. All right, so we said just soil, it's a law of being born on the soil. Let's hear about Moroccans.
And point of interest, remember, King, like they said, prior to when they were doing the Census Act, your surname determined the origins of where you come from.
Yes.
And that has not changed.
That has not changed
today.
United States Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States ratified 1868 provide all persons being born or naturalized, you still got the same status. We already established that. Let's go to Morocco, since we think we're Moors. Reject just soil. There's a trend of some countries toward restricting elect soil by requiring that at least one of the child parents be a citizen, national or legal permanent resident of the state in question at the time of the child's birth. Modification of just Soli has been criticized as contributing to economic inequality, the perpetuation of unfree labor from a headlock underclass, and statelessness. Just Soli has been restricted in the following countries. Morocco. It's restricted. So if you ain't born in Morocco, if you're born in America and claim to be a Moroccan descendant, you got a problem. You got a problem because there's no protection here in lieu of your estate. Because the state is based off a grant. Morocco didn't give any grants to America. Because they were not monarch over America according to how it was passed down through what we call operation of law. Because citizenship, birthright citizenship, passes by operation of law, just like property. So if you got a birthright, that means that you got some property sit somewhere.
Yep.
Right? And we know property is land. That was the problem with Calvin's case. He only got birthright ship as well as the right to hold land.
Exactly.
Based off his status as a foreigner, not a national. Because Parliament of England did not allow them to inherit property. We can see that in the Prescription Act now. That prohibited Ireland and Scotland from inheriting territory going back to time immemorial, which the court used to determine the right of reversion of remandment of an estate. We're removing what they call a cloudy title off an estate. And which we're about to do. Why? Because we're heirs. We don't have a deed. We have a right because we have an express trust. An express trust, what is that? The language in the trust denotes to, in the language, heirs and successors based off the grantee to the grantees. That's called an express trust. Let's get to this. Just Sanguinis, just soil, we've seen that. It's just based off being born on the soil. What is just Sanguinis? Sister Walker?
Just sanguineous, right of blood, is a principle of nationality law by which citizenship is derived or acquired by the nationality or ethnicity of one or both parents. Children at birth may be citizens of a particular state if either or both of their parents have citizenship of that state. It may also apply to national identities of ethnic, cultural, or other origins. Citizenship can also apply to children whose parents belong to a diaspora,
My bad.
Diaspora. Not themselves citizens of the state, conferring citizenship. This principle contrasts with just Soli, right of soil.
All right, that's good right there. That's good. So it contrasts with just soil, right of soil, whereas just Sanguinis deal with blood, ethnicity, customs, culture, etc. Very important factor. Why is that? Okay, let's go here. Patrilineality. Brother Gray, you read. Brother Gray.
Yeah, I just had to unmute King. Patrilineality, also known as a male line, the spear side, or agnatic kingship, is a common kingship system in which an individual's family member derives from and is recorded through their father's lineage. It generally involves the inheritance of property, rights, names, or titles by persons related through male kin.
Stop. Now, didn't it say Part 2 Secretary being trimmed severed that? It said it severed the father line and the child developed the status of the mother or the Part 2 Secretary being trimmed. So that means that the patrilineality of the bloodline, i.e. agnatic succession, is gone. King Edgar was called King Edgar the Peaceful. That means rich in spirits, meaning rich in ancestors, because spirit-sided deals with patrilineal descent. All right, King Edgar means rich in spirits. Okay, which is rich in ancestors. All right, and it said that members derived from and is recorded through the father's lineage. It generally involves the inheritance of property rights, names, or titles by persons related to the male kin. All right, let's go to matrilineal.
Point of interest, they said the House of Plantagenet had many heirs.
Yes, many heirs. Brother Gray.
Matrilineality is the tracing of kinship through the female line. It may also correlate with a social system in which each person is identified with their matrial line, their mother's lineage, and which can involve the inheritance of property and or titles. A matrial line is a line of descent from a female ancestors to a descendant of either sex, in which the individuals in all intervening generations are mothers, in other words, a mother line. In a matrilineal descent system, an individual is considered to belong to the same descent group as their mother. This ancient matrilineal descent pattern is in contrast to the current more popular pattern of patrilineal descent, from which a family name is derived. The matrial line of historical nobility was also called their enatic or uterine ancestry, corresponding to the patrilineal or agnatic ancestry.
You see that? So they're one and the same. Agnatic uterine succession derives from agnatic succession because it's a way to pass the heirship down through the bloodline of the patrilineal descent. You need both lines though. Man can't have babies and I mean, come on now. Come on.
And point of interest, I like the fact how it says historical nobility, because historically, like I said, there was no separation of man and woman. You know, we was a perfect union. And like the king just said, that men can't have babies, and every woman we know has a father.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, now let's deal with this. What is a grant? Go ahead, brother. Greg.
A grant in law is a transfer of property, generally from a person or other entity giving the property, the grantor, to the person or entity receiving the property, the grantee. Historically, a grant was a transfer by deed of that which could not be passed by livery, an act evidenced by letters patent under the Great Seal, granting something from the king to a subject, and a technical term made use of in deeds of conveyance of lands to import a transfer.
Stop. That's the main focal point. A grant is under law is to transfer of property, whether it's real property or personal property. All right, from a grantor to a grantee, which means that you are the beneficiary. If it's passed to an administrator, i.e. trustee, because the grantee had to come to age, that means that the trust had to be looked over by administrator of the trust. But they took that over by way of transferring to those foreigners through what they call letter patents under a great sale. And they didn't want to do it according to the factual monarchs under the Stamp Act. And that's why they broke away and created a new seal called the seal of the state, which is a violation of law because it did not agree to the original contract in regards to the grantees. You follow? Because it's not based off just sanguinius. It's based off just soil. And just because you're born here, don't make you of the blood. It don't make you of the blood. All right? Now let's go here. So we know what a grant is. Let's go to a grantor. Grantor, Investopia. Because I don't want to go to Wikipedia. They say, well, why you don't go to a source? Let's go to Investopia. Read what they say, Brother Gray.
What is a grantee? A grantee is a recipient of a grant, scholarship, or some other asset such as real estate property.
Hold on.
In contrast, a grantor is a person or entity that conveys ownership of an asset to another person or entity. The grantee. Identifying the grantee and the grantor is especially important in legal documents as specific duties, responsibilities, benefits, and limitations are assigned to each.
1 second, 1 second. My screen is messing up. One second. Pause it for me, Archbishop. Yes, so here we bring this to grantor. Grant is a very important term because we know as in a grant, there must be a grant given by a grantor on behalf of a grantee. And in modern day, the grantor is called the lessor and the lessee. And the lessee will be the tenant, and the lessor will be the person assumed to be the grantor, and he's really called the tenant in chief. So as Brother Scott from the House of Scott said, he checked his deed and they got him as a tenant. You know what I'm saying? So as a tenant, you actually have a lease. It's like a lease. You have a lease on some property that's been leased to you. All right? From a lessor, which is the grantor, which is based upon fee and simple. Because they haven't established an owner. And I know what I want to look up. Here we go. 1 second. All right.
So point of interest, so they had Brother Scott listed as a 30-year leasee. Mortgages are nothing more than leases.
Dead pledge. That's what we got, the statute of mortmain. Statute of mortmain is called a dead pledge.
Funny how that brought that up, Coast County, Illinois, that's where the Moors,
Mm-hmm.
the home base.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Yeah. Okay, grantor. Everybody see that?
Yes.
All right. Brother Scott, you can take it from here.
Muted, Brother Scott.
Sorry about that. What is a grantor? A grantor is an individual or other entity that creates a trust, i.e., the individual whose assets are put into the trust regardless of whether the grantor also functions as the trustee. The grantor may also be referred to as the settlor, trustmaker, or trustor. A grantor can also refer to the seller or writer of either call or put options contracts who collects the premiums for which the options are sold. Options are sold through exchanges to option holders who are responsible for the payment of the premium.
Okay, that's good. All right, so a grantor is one who creates a trust. It says a grantor can also function as a trustee because he's a party of interest.
Mhm.
And the trust is created for the beneficiary, which is called the grantee. So just look up grantee. Everybody can see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, read what a grantee is.
What is a grantee? Grantee is the recipient of a grant, scholarship, or some other asset such as real estate, property. In contrast, a grantor is a person or entity that conveys ownership of an asset to another person or entity. The grantee, identifying the grantee, and grantor is especially important in legal documents as specific duties, responsibilities, benefits, and limitations are assigned to each.
Okay, read the next part.
Understanding grantees. A grantee is the recipient of something granted or given. The term can be used in different contexts and across different industries and institutions. In real estate, the grantee takes title to the purchased property. In academia, a grantee is the recipient of a scholarship or grant. In the investment industry, a grantee can be the recipient of stock options.
Okay, so you have different definitions for grantee or grantor in lieu of a grant. But we must go back to the origin of where they stem from. And as we ran under grant law, it stems from a monarch or a king to his subject, right? Or can they even extend it to a naturalized or a citizen if the king so wishes, in lieu of the rights pertaining to the grant. So us as English nationals don't have a grant based off a letter pattern for denization, as we define. Our grant is based off the estate left by the grantor, the minor, by the express will in the trust that operates by way of operation of law. All right, that's like Intel estate. Intel passes by way of operation of law. Birthright travels by way of operation of law, because there's something that was left before you got here to inherit that deal with hereditaments. All right, which falls under just Sanguinis and not just Soli, because as we just read, that the monarchs of the House of Stuart, as well as all their citizens who were the ones who created the colonies and plantations, didn't have the right as an English subject who was a national. English Parliament tried to pass laws, but they did not enact laws for that. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, so that means that in order for you to inherit property, whether it's real or personal, under the laws of hereditament or inheritance, then there must be a grantor and a grantee. And based off something that's supposed to pass to you by way of operation of law. Because stuff that's done by way of scholarships is not done, it's based on operation of law, but at that time when they were instituted. Not something already instilled in law prior to the subject matter in reference to the assets being transferred by conveyance by the trustee. All right, because the beneficiaries have not come to aid in regards to the assets that resulted in the trust being created in the first place, whether they were movable or personal property or non-movable property. That all denotes to assets, which is called an estate. But you have to be in your proper standing in law to have access to the estate. That's why you have a trustee to administer on your behalf as wards. And as wards, you're not a grantee anymore because you're not allowed to have property ownership as Calvin did, being descendant of a Scottish monarch, because as English heirs and successors, you were considered tenants in chief, which had the right to hold property but not own it, which is in the case with most situations dealing with ownership of property, because it's based on a legal interest and not an equitable interest on it, because you have a deed. Now, what is a deed? Brother Scott, read.
Recorder of Deeds or Deeds Registry is a government office tasked with maintaining public records and documents, especially records relating to real estate ownership that provide persons other than the owner of a property with real rights over that property.
What's wrong with that picture? Read that again.
Recorder of Deeds or Deeds Registry is a government office tasked with maintaining public records and documents, especially records relating to real estate ownership that provide persons other than the owner of a property with real rights over that property.
All right, now tell me what that's saying.
It's contradicting itself. I mean, in several places. So,
Well, good observation, Brother Scott from the House of Scott. It's a straight up contradictory. Straight up, recorder of the deed or a deed. Now, didn't it say deed supposed to be a instrument to note the ownership?
It's supposed to.
As you said, you got a deed, but it don't denote the ownership. It said you're a tenement. You're a tenant.
absolutely.
So the only rights you got to the possession of the property is based off what the lessor granted you, which is based off a lease agreement or a mortgage, which is based off the compliance to ordinances and codes, as well as taxation that the landlord had put it on you to pay when he's supposed to be paying, because he's the tenant in chief. Who's supposed to pay the grantor, which was the minor. But now he ain't paying because you switched places with him. Why? Because when they recorded the property in the said county, which according to 48(1-6, they're not even legislatively constructed. They're just there for reference purposes. So if the deed where the county was, where the deed was filed is not legislatively constructed, it's not constitutionally sound in regard to the recording that's filed within the county, and then that was filed within the county, it's giving property to other people other than the owner, as if they got a right over the property. Now, how is that possible? Because ain't no heirs involved, because ain't no just sanguinis. You need blood right to inhabit in the hereditaments based off something was passed through the law of hereditaments, which is based off a trust that operates based off that transfer by way of operation of law called the law of conveyance. All right. Now, as we can see, the recorder of deeds in regards to real estate property, i.e. real property, land, the building and the fixtures thereof, is property recorded in the public record, called an official recording. An official recording provides everybody with the rights to the property or over that property other than the owner of the property. Does that make sense? I'm gonna tell you why it don't make sense, because they're not heirs. Let's go ahead. Heirs of the body. Read that, Brother Scott.
Heirs of the body. In English law, heirs of the body is the principle that certain types of property passed to a descendant of the original holder, recipient, or grantee according to a fixed order of kinship. Upon the death of the grantee, a designated inheritance, such as a parcel of land, a peerage, or a monarchy, passes automatically to that living, legitimate, natural descendant of the grantee, who is most senior in the descendant according to primogeniture. Primogeniture. Males being preferred, however, over their sisters, regardless of relative age, and thereafter the property continues to pass to subsequent descendants of the grantee according to the same formula upon the death of each subsequent heir.
Now remember, these kings back in our ancestors' days were young as hell.
Exactly.
12, 13,
Mhm.
14. This is the time when they became kings. That's unheard of. So look at the amount of responsibilities that we as heirs, we in our 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s now. But you see the responsibilities that our ancestors had at a younger age.
Yeah.
And look how much we have fallen from that responsibility put on our younger periods and now left up to our older periods that don't know what the hell they're talking about.
And point of interest, our ancestors back then knew the understanding, the reason why they preferred to have a male to take that type of responsibility, because this is a lot to put on to our sisters, mothers, daughters, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, this is a big burden to carry. But as a man, you know, we are created to be able to deal with these types of issues, you know, so be able to protect and save the family, so that way that they can continue to keep doing what they need to do to keep the heirs learning what it is they need to maintain their status throughout the world.
Well said, Archbishop. Now it goes on to say that baronies created by writs of summons to Parliament usually descended to heirs of the body of the grantee and may thus be inherited by females. It's the breaking of the cognatic succession by the terms of the Act of Settlement in 1701. The Act of Settlement, when they transferred the authority of who would be the monarch to Sophia Handover's son, King George. All right, that's called the Settlement Act of 1701. So they knew what they were doing in regards to filling the heirs of the body by way of us being the original grantees to a grant given by the grantor, who was a monarch, who was supposed to be of English heirs, English descent, but he wasn't. That's the reason why they only can deal with just soil birthright and not just Sanguinis. That can only be done by us, by heirs and successors. How we know that? Look at this. Do they see that?
It's still underneath heirs of the body. You got to reshare it.
All those who think they're heir, successor, you better show them this. You better show them that. Read, Brother Scott.
Oh, right.
This is from your county clerk's office, the county's recorder.
And hold on.
Remember, go ahead, Archbishop.
That's our 30 minutes.
Oh, boy. Wow.